there. It is Mike Levin on Thursday, January 13th, 2021. And another during the day errand, so you get to see me in a little bit of sunlight. And my last video on whether to wait for AI or just learn Python was pretty popular. For me, as 60 views in a couple of days, right? That's popular as opposed to the 600,000 that these million follower people get. But I'd follow on to that because I think I really hit a chord with people. There's a lot of, hey, let's just wait for our parents because we're going to have super intelligent parents to do everything we don't want to do in 5, 10, 15 years tops. And a lot of that is actually true. However, it won't be free. And there will still be an economy, and you're still going to have to contribute something back in order to get out of it what you want. There's going to be exchange, so be good at stuff. And because you have to describe to an AI what you want done, there's still language in the picture, and our preferred language and everyday experience is now our, spoken native language, which in a lot of people's cases is English. Although I'm sure just as many AI systems will be responding to Chinese these days. Now, if you want a language that cuts across all spoken languages and purges out all the ambiguity and necessity for superintelligence, you just choose a machine language, one of them being Python. Now, I'm not talking about the machine language in particular, because every version of hardware has its own instruction set, its machine language, and assembly is the closest language to that. It uses words instead of register numbers and stuff, but I digress. Point being that Python is just as legitimate as any language to speak to an AI in, to express what you want. And particularly because it's light and breezy, it tears out a lot of syntax. It doesn't have a lot of arbitrary decisions in how you format the code. There's generally one way to format things in Python, and it's a way that strips out a lot of nonsense and keeps number of lines to a minimum. And so that was the last video. And in this video, I thought I would address, how does that help you? How do you ask for something of a machine intelligence in Python, and then it can do more for you than what you asked for originally? Well, scaling is one of those ways. It's fairly easy to write something for just yourself. It's because it does away with the permission issue. You have privileged access to the system you're writing. No one else can get to your machine but you, so you don't have to necessarily deal with logins. So as soon as you release an app like that to the world, there's an issue with permissions. It can run local on their machine, but if there's any common resource context, i.e. it runs in the cloud or the web, then you got to deal with permissions, and the app becomes much more complex. The other big one, which is also related to releasing it to a lot of people, is of course scaling. So what I would recommend is in Python, in addition to the basics, right? Get the basics down, lists, tuples, and dicts. If you don't think in those three data structures just naturally, as if a native spoken language, knowing what those data types do, knowing that a list works like a slide rule with square sides that gets bigger and smaller, and that a tuple is more like a capsule of a particular size with round edges, curved edges. It's very visual. It's much more visual than one would think. And then, of course, the dictionaries are like JSON objects. They use the curly brackets, which in most cases I'm so opposed to for code block structures, except for the Go language. It gets get out of jail free on that front, because there's only one position for the curly braces in the Go language, which does away with my main problem with it. And I think it also favors the non-extra line way of wrapping them. But anyway, in Python, the curly braces really are for dictionaries, which are key value pairs. And it's curly braces, so it's organic, and dictionaries have all different kinds of shapes you can make out of them. So there's your three data structures in Python. You should be thinking about them like that, and it becomes very natural, just rolls off your tongue, such as it were. Fits in your head. There's so many metaphors people have used for languages like Python that are beautifully designed and whose core functionality is small enough that you can actually just keep its general behavior in your head. That's a thing. So Python is closer to a natural, breezy language like English than other languages like Java, JavaScript, C, and all those other ALGOL 60 derivative languages, or BCPL. There's different stories there, but they all sort of inherit from the same small set of stuff, which really did enable the digital age, because ALGOL 60 inspired B and BCPL, and the BCPL language was used to write early versions of Unix and the C language itself, and then the C language was used to write modern Unix, and then Linux copied Unix and wrote the GCC compiler, so C remained a very popular mainstream language that all the comp sci people learned in college, and so that became the right way to do things. And so all other languages copied C's syntax, for better or for worse, and as a lot of Python people would believe, for the worse. So when you're taking up Python, in addition to it being a light, breezy language, the things I would look for in the language to help you in your transition to having machine parents, having AI systems, making the difficult parts easy, would be those parts where today people are describing as, and then that scales easily, or that scales unlimited, right? So it's a lot of machine learning, right? The machine learning API, I guess it's an API, the way you interact, API, application programming interface. So the way you interface with the application of machine learning. If you learn to do that in the small, breezy Python way with small local data sets, pretty magically, as all these capabilities expand exponentially, you will be able to articulate requests that will serve millions or billions of people as easily as it was serving just you. And then you could build a user interface around it with machine learning. Forget user interface. Everything everyone uses JavaScript today for in the front end, the browser client side. It's tedious work that design iteration through machine learning will be able to do best. So basically the whole front-end web design, except for the stylistic part, will be going away. You'll be able to skin things, but machine learning systems will be much better at looking at your code, looking at well-defined inputs and outputs. It's the way it runs, synchronously versus asynchronously, non-blocking I/O. So you give thought to that in how your functions work. You program them asynchronously when they're going to need to be. And then that stuff will just magically get user interfaces on it, have the infrastructure back end to scale to millions, and you'll be able to let stuff out into the world much more easily than you can today. All the tedium of building a Django app into Instagram, right? You just build the Django app and sprinkle the magic Instagram scaling fairy dust. So you can totally learn Python today focusing on those parts where the magic fairy dust is going to be able to be sprinkled. Anything with the MapReduce concept in it, which basically applies to all list comprehension. So learn to use the list comprehension API from within Python, and a lot of your stuff is going to magically scale. And that's about it. This is a short drive. I thought I'd just do this quick follow-on to that last video, since I struck chords with a lot of people. Learn how to talk in Python in ways that, machine learning systems and AI in the future will really be able to help, expand and blossom your work, so you can focus on those core app concepts without all those gotchas that really are stumbling blocks to most people in building enterprises. It's easy to learn to code. It's hard to build an enterprise. It's hard to build an empire out of what you've built because of all those scaling and permission issues. Anyhow, thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.